It is 4:20 in the morning, and I just got back to Abidjan from Yamoussoukro, and I think I just witnessed one of the greatest football matches in my life. It isn't that the football was great. It wasn't that the players were world class quality, but this match was the essence of what an African Cup of Nations match should be. Hello and welcome. My name is Maher Mazahi. This is another episode of the African Five-A-Side podcast, and today we're recapping the third day of the round of 16 matches in the 2023 African Cup of Nations. As always, this podcast is brought to you by africasaCountry.com. And I want to talk to you tonight about a match that I just saw in Yamoussoukro, the political capital of Cote d'Ivoire, between Senegal and hosts of the tournament, Cote d'Ivoire. So, coming into this match, Cote d'Ivoire got into the round of 16 by sneaking in through the back door. They only had 3 points after the group stages, and they were the final best third place team. There's four that qualify into the round of 16 in the AFCON in this current format, and they were the final one. They were the fourth and final one. They needed a win from Morocco to get through, and that's what they ended up getting. After they made it into the round of 16, their coach, Jean-Louis Gasset, was fired. One of his assistants, Emers Faye, was hired to become the new head coach. Some of his assistants were actually on television doing consultant work throughout the beginning of this tournament. After he was handed the job, the Ivorian Federation come to him and say, actually, you know what? We spoke to Hervé Renard, so did the Prime Minister of the country, and we're thinking maybe we're going to offer Hervé Renard the job. And Emers Faye doesn't blink, and he says, all right, do what you got to do. I'm going to prepare as if I'm the coach. And he does. And they're up against the defending champions. Not only the defending champions in 2021, but Senegal have so much momentum at all levels. They won the CHAN, they won the under-20 African Cup of Nations. I believe they won the under-17 African Cup of Nations as well. They won the beach soccer African Cup of Nations. They qualified to the World Cup and they didn't have Sadio Mane. But if they did, maybe they could have went on a very far run, kind of like Morocco did as well. And then in this tournament, they have 9 points out of 3 matches. They won every single one of their matches. The only team to do that in the African Cup of Nations. And you're thinking, oh man, the hosts, Cote d'Ivoire, might be humiliated 2 consecutive times. It was almost like they were supposed to be eliminated. They got through on a technicality, and now they're really going to be eliminated. That's what the fear was, really. So everything's set up for a lot of drama. Tactically, let's talk tactics just for a quick second. Aliou Cissé goes from a 4-3-3 to a 3-4-3, and he does that because his central defensive midfielder, his six, his sentinel, like they say in French, Pape Gueye, who's been fantastic throughout this tournament, he's injured. So if Pape Gueye can't go, instead of replacing him with a player like Nampalys Mendy or Cheikhou Kouyaté, which would have been a like-for-like substitution or replacement, he decides to go for a 3-4-3, sticking with 2 central midfielders and adding a center half. Thought that was interesting. I don't know if it was the right decision, but it's just something to note. Emers Faye, in his first match, continues with the 4-3-3 that his predecessor, Jean-Louis Gasset, played. However, he made a lot of different personnel choices. So Max Alain Gradel, I think he's 30... Is he 34 or 36? But he starts on the left. Jean-Michel Sarri, I know he's on the other side of 30 as well. He might be 31, 32. He starts as a central defensive midfielder. Serge Aurier gets the nod at right back. Remember him and Wilfried Singo. They've been alternating starting positions throughout this tournament. And he gives Odilon Kousounou, the starting center half at Bayer Leverkusen, who are top of the Bundesliga. He didn't get a look in with Jean-Louis Gasset, but he gives him a chance and he starts him as a center half instead of Diomande, the 19-year-old center half that's played at sometimes, or Willy Boly, the Nottingham Forest veteran that's started other games. So Emers Faye really bets on experience. And you think that that's probably the right thing to do, right? Because coming into this match, they had just lost 4-0 to Equatorial Guinea at home. Ugh. So you're going up against the best side in Africa. You think now is a good time to really bank on experience and at least help us get through this first half relatively unscathed. And what do you know? The worst case possible, the worst scenario possible. Cote d'Ivoire concede within 5 minutes. And it's Sadio Mane who looked very lively early on and late, I think, in this match. He finds some space on the wing, twists and turns, gets a cross in. Habib Diallo takes the ball on his chest, hits it on the half volley, straight into the roof of the net. Beautiful goal. And you're thinking, I remember I was speaking to a colleague from The Guardian right before the match, and I was saying, you know what? I have a good feeling about Cote d'Ivoire, but they have to get late into the match either with a lead or, with a draw. If they concede early, the crowd is going to go silent. Their confidence, especially, their fragile confidence, might be shattered, and that wouldn't be a good sign. And that's effectively what happened. The life was sucked out of the crowd. Those doubts were reinforced, but just 25 minutes in, Cote d'Ivoire started to get the upper hand. Before that happened, actually, speaking of experience and not making stupid mistakes, Sadio Mane goes in on a high tackle, which should have been a red card. He should have been sent off just immediately after the goal, after Habib Diallo's goal. That was, I think, one of the first in a long string of officiating mistakes that were made in this match. The Gabonese referee, Pierre Acho, his name is? Pierre Ghislain Acho, I think his name is, yeah. Yeah. Very, 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 very poor performance. The worst in this tournament by far. So, yeah, 25 minutes in, up until halftime, Cote d'Ivoire starts to get a foothold in this game. And this is the most impressive thing about their performance is their mental strength. Again, they're losing 1-0. Senegal get off to a flying start. In that position, if they concede a second, I think fans start insulting players. Players start insulting other players. Confidence completely drops, and they have no belief. But for them to even be losing 1-0 after that 4-0 loss, and for them to start coming back into this match as of the 25th minute, absolute credit for the mental strength that takes. Nothing but respect. So halftime, right before halftime, Cote d'Ivoire were really, really pushing. And I think here, there's a few different reasons why they dominated possession. Number one, the center halves I thought were great on the ball. Evan Ndika, but especially Odilon Kasuna, the player that got his chance in this match. He made some defensive mistakes. Like I thought he might have gotten away with a penalty on Ismail Assar later in the match. But otherwise, he was strong in the tackle. And one thing he did really good was if he's on the ball and if Senegal were sitting off of him, he would drive forward and progress the ball and force the Senegalese defenders to commit. And then that really did a lot for, aiding some of the Ivorian attack. The other reason why I thought they dominated possession was that their central midfielders were on fire again. Again, Emers Faye benched Franck Kessié. He plays Jean-Michel Seri in that sixth position, and Ibrahim Sangare is a more shuttling midfielder, also known as an 8. And Seko Fofana was more of like in between an 8 and a 10. And I think it worked to a charm. Great complementarity between players in midfield. Jean-Michel Seri ended up being man of the match, and Seko Fofana was everywhere. It's such a strength of his that it almost becomes a weakness at times because you think he can burn himself out, by the 70th or 75th minute, which is essentially what happened, and he was subbed off. But when he's, fresh, he's all over the pitch. He's the only Ivorian midfielder that can have that kind of creativity, and he can even be a goal-scoring threat. So Seko Fofana, hats off to you again. Senegal, I think, we're backing up as well. This is a big part of the problem, and Aliou Cisse, I think, recognized this. He said, we lost control of the game. And their 3-4-3 almost became a 5-4-1 with the fullbacks dropping back and even the wingers dropping back. And maybe they were just looking to protect the lead a little too much. Maybe they scored too early. That was definitely seemed to be a problem for Senegal. And when they did, Aliou Cissé said it wasn't a problem of us playing a low block. He said it was a problem of us when we recover the ball making too many technical errors. A misplaced pass, a bad control, things like that. Uh, and I think I agree with him. I think there's something to be said about the block. I did mention that the fullbacks came back maybe a bit too far, the wingers came back a bit too far, but he's absolutely right about technical problems for the Senegalese national team. They didn't look sharp, especially at the end of the first half and throughout the second half. Nonetheless, we're into the 60th, 65th, 70th minute. Cote d'Ivoire are dominating, but they're dominating with sterile possession. And you're wondering, where's the goal going to come from? And here Emers Faye, in his first match as a real coach, or as a head coach, I should say, makes an amazing array of subs. He throws on Nicolas Pepe, Simon Adingra, Franck Kessié, and finally, Sebastien Haller. And if you were in the stadium, you would see the reception that Sebastien Haller got first when he went to go warm up, and then when he came back to be subbed on. He's a crowd favorite. They love him. They know that they need him. I think there's nobody else really that can provide what he does. Him and Simon Adingra. Throughout this tournament, my colleague Alistair, he made a very good point. He was telling me that Ivory Coast front line, first of all, every match it seemed like there was a different starting front three. But when they did play, they played in isolation. It was almost like, okay, Jeremy Boga, you have the ball on the wing, go take your defender one-on-one. Or it was like, Jean Crasso, go do the same thing. Kwame, go do the same thing. Pepe, go do the same thing. There wasn't a lot of combination. There wasn't a lot of interplay. And I think that was a big problem. And Simon Adingra, in 15 minutes, he completely changed it. He was fantastic. And Jean-Louis Gasset is probably sitting at home saying, if only I had Adingra and Haller. They really changed the match. Those subs changed the match for Cote d'Ivoire. The goal itself came from an Adingra Haller combination. Adingra did a great job of saving the ball, finding Haller in space. Haller gets his head up, plays a through ball. I think Kwame touches it. Maybe Nicolas Pepe's upside. I'm not sure. And then quite obvious penalty. I could not believe this was probably the clearest penalty I have ever seen in my life. The goalkeeper obviously didn't get the ball. Nicolas Pepe obviously got the ball. He was obviously upended by the goalkeeper. And still, the referee, Pierre Acho, is just waiting. If he didn't see it, he's incompetent. If he's waiting for VAR, he's incompetent. Because when he waits for VAR, the Ivorian players get frustrated and he books one of them. That booking, if you had the courage to call a penalty, as you're supposed to, if you saw it and you're waiting for VAR, you need the courage to call that penalty. That booking could be erased, So Pierre Acho, that's a big problem. Him and his entire crew, actually. There were a few the fourth referee was a woman. There was a lineswoman. There was a linesman. They were all very poor on so many different decisions, and even things like messing up the numbers. When players are being subbed on or subbed off. So that just wanted to make a quick note about that. Anyways, it's a clear penalty. Franck Kessié comes on. He was one of the subs that Emers Faye made. Scores cool, calm, and collected penalty. Exactly what you need. I think in his 86th minute. It's crazy when you think about it that now they're going to the quarterfinals, Cote d'Ivoire, and the country is in absolute bliss and joy and happiness. And they were 4 minutes from being eliminated. They scored in the 86th minute. Crazy. Extra time I thought was a lot more balanced than regular time, where Cote d'Ivoire were probably the much better side. I didn't get a great view of much of the first half. I was, weaving in and out, trying to speak to Ivorian supporters. I did watch the second half of extra time. And again, I thought it was more balanced, definitely. Could have went either way. Penalties, and Cote d'Ivoire have an unfair lineup when it comes to penalties. And Senegal have good penalty takers as well, but Cote d'Ivoire, Nicolas Pepe, Franck Kessié, so many good, even, well, Max Langrada, I think, was subbed off, but they have so many good, um, Sebastian Aller, so many good penalty kick takers. I loved Aller's penalty. Um, it was like one of those where he gives the goalkeeper the eyes, swivels his hips, goalkeeper is stuck in his spot, and his reaction was looking around. It was almost Zlatan-esque, like, what else did you think was gonna happen? Like, kind of like that's what he was saying to the crowd. So Aller, great, great substitution. Great to have him back, and great to have him at the African Cup of Nations. Musa Nyakate, sorry, feel bad for him. He hits the post, um, and Cote d'Ivoire win on penalty kicks 5-4. For me, it was a classic simply because of the narratives coming into the match that I explained, um, and the reversal of fortunes, really, and the unpredictability of the African Cup of Nations. The African Cup of Nations doesn't like favorites. The statistic is doing the rounds, but since 2010, none of the champions have progressed past or have progressed to the quarterfinals, or have progressed to the quarterfinals. Crazy, crazy statistic, and indicative of the fact that this tournament is so difficult to be consistent in, you know? After the match, this was, I think, one of the best things about going to the stadium is the insight you get from being in the stadium after the match, for example. Um, when the TV cuts back to the studio and you could see who's talking to who's celebrating how, um, it gives you a lot of insight. So I'll give you a few examples. After Senegal missed, or after Senegal lost the penalty kick shootout, Evan Indika goes over and consoles a few Senegalese players. Shows great maturity, and he's been shown maturity in like playing and off the pitch as well. Seko Fofana and Ibrahim Sangare were the two Ivorians that were really pumping up the crowd, that really wanted the crowd to get into it and really wanted to celebrate with the crowd. So for me, it's indicative of them, it meaning a lot to them as well. Them and even Maxalin Gradel. Um, Lamine Camara, Senegal's star midfielder, just 19 years old, was absolutely inconsolable. And I tweeted this, and I tweeted a video that went viral. Um, it was weird because you could see the celebrations, and then you could see one Senegalese player, and they were covering his face with a towel, I think, so the television cameras wouldn't get to him. And initially, he didn't even know who it was. I promise you, I'm not exaggerating when I tell you he was there for at least 10 to 15 minutes, crying, 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 barely walking off the pitch, maybe walking 5 meters a minute, maybe. He's just like completely inconsolable, always surrounded by, his teammates or his staff. Even Ivorian players came to say, like, keep your head up, keep your chin up. And it reminded me so much of 2017 when Sadio Mane missed a penalty in the quarterfinals of the AFCON. And he had a similar reaction. But Lamine Camara was worse. And Lamine Camara didn't miss a penalty. It just meant so much to him, And on one hand, it's heartening to see that. On the other hand, your heart kind of breaks for the kid, right? But he's had a fantastic 12 months. And the coach said, in the post-match press conference that he's absolutely sure that he's going to be in this position again and that he's going to win. And he's going to have, achieve so many great things for his country in the future. But that was interesting to see how much it meant to him, and the parallel with Sadio Mane, and then the dance party. For those of you that don't know, there's a song in Cote d'Ivoire called Coup du Marteau. It's the unofficial song of this African Cup of Nations. I think it was commissioned by Orange, the French mobile telecom company. But when it's played, people get up and they dance. And the DJ at the stadium at Yamoussoukro played it nonstop after the penalty shootouts. And it was just an impromptu dance party all around. The entire 20,000 people that were there, the players, the journalists, everybody was just in such a great mood. And even driving back from Yamoussoukro to Abidjan, like, for example, you stop at the tolls, to pay for the highway. And people are handing out free water. I think they do that anyways, but blowing their whistles. On billboards, it says, there's some electronic billboards and some screens. Bravo les éléphants. Just, man, what a difference, 4 or 5 days makes in the African Cup of Nations. After that Equatorial Guinea loss, this AFCON was, dead and buried for Cote d'Ivoire. And now it's one of the most magical storylines in football. Anyways, that's the match I wanted to talk about a lot because I saw so many great things. So wow, I've already spoken about it for 20 minutes. I hope that isn't too long. I didn't get to watch much of Mauritania versus Cape Verde as well. Sorry about that. From what I saw, it kind of went as we expected, where Cape Verde had more possession of the ball. Mauritania kept their shape. They pressed when they needed to. They were very intense in their duels. Remember, they were leading the competition in tackles, second in interceptions, the least amount of ball possession. And Cape Verde get through on a penalty kick. I thought they would have won maybe 2-0 or 2-1, but uh, quarterfinal berth for the Blue Sharks. What a great story that is as well. Hats off to Mauritania, and especially their coach Amir Abdou. I think he had them really well drilled. Um, but yeah, I can't make much more comments because I didn't really watch that match. So yeah, apologies that this podcast came out so late. Of course, I always want to post it immediately after the match. But the scenes there, I couldn't take my eyes off of it. And then the press conference, and then we had to hop in a taxi quickly to get back to Abidjan. So yeah, crazy day in the African Cup of Nations again. Thanks for listening. Keep it locked in as we continue to cover the round of 16. The final day of the round of 16 is tomorrow. So thanks for listening one more time. Talk to you tomorrow. Peace.